Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Boom, 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 boom. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakian. Really excited to be talking about our thoughts on Impaulsive's first 3 episodes. There is a very interesting movement that's going on in our world, and that movement is the vodcast movement. Vodcasts are proliferating all across the world right now. Especially in the United States, they're becoming more and more popular. We see this here with Logan Paul's new vodcast called Impaulsive. And furthermore, there are more and more people popping up in this space that are being told, hey, get your own video show. Hey, get your own podcast. Hey, so there's more and more push for eyeballs, more and more push for attention across our world. And we have absolutely no idea where that's going with the attention economy yet. It's a very difficult future to predict. But one thing that we know for sure is that it's really important to get people's attention so that your messages, your memetics can be disseminated through the universe to the masses, to as many people as possible. So absolutely nuts that this is going on right now. And I'm here to unpack the nuance of Impaulsive because actually Logan's had some interesting guests on that have been discussing some things that I think are important to talk about, especially network effects and network theory and the way that those things are playing out in our world. So as you can see here, Logan sits down with his roommates. His roommates are Big Mike and Spencer Taylor. And Spencer's on the right, Big Mike's on the left. And their first episode was with the sex therapist called, her name's Dr. Shannon Chavez. And so they went into depth on sexual health, on sexual energy, on doing things like using Tinder or Bumble or these other new age platforms to connect with other people. And so I want to start unpacking the nuance of this one, and then we'll get further into the network effects with Jojo Siwa, the second guest on the podcast, and then Summer Rae, the third guest on the podcast. Definitely enjoy this beautiful waterfall behind me, the serene sort of nature. I love this image. I've been using it now. It's so good. All right, so let's jump into this by talking about the importance of sex and sexual health and understanding kind of the variables that go into sex between people. And this is becoming more and more important to understand because so many people are using Tinder, using Bumble. They're trying to push for sexual play with each other in new ways that have yet to be explored by civilization. These are new technologies enabling us to connect with people in this sense. And so a lot of the things that were discussed, I thought were really important. And I think it's really important to not necessarily poke fun at some of these things, because when you're having lots of sex, getting tested frequently is extremely important. And making sure that you're in good sexual health is something that you're able to then carry with you in your day-to-day life, as in you can know that you are in your peak state and your organ systems and your blood and your body is not being affected negatively by sexually transmitted infections and that kind of stuff. So this is really important to know, because for men it's really hard to test for HPV, but it's one of the largest contributors to cervical cancer for women. So again, this is extremely important to unpack about each other, about ourselves and each other, but also to openly and freely be willing to have consensual, loving, caring, and beautiful sex with each other. Because, as you know, that's how we procreate and that's how we continue civilization forward. We wouldn't be able to go anywhere without sex. We would be stuck at our current generation. So keep having those babies. All right. I thought the next point that I want to bring up here is about DMs. So this is becoming more and more important. This whole influencer network, this whole Los Angeles thing that's blowing up, the whole nodal network that's starting to blow up around that area especially. Our studio here, Simulation, is based in San Francisco. And in San Francisco, we have a high density of really strong nodal networks of people like scientists or entrepreneurs or artists or educators in some sort of tech. A lot of it's tech-based. And that's amazing. Silicon Valley is amazing in that sense, a global leader in that sense. But Los Angeles is a global leader in art, entertainment, acting, music, and whatnot. So movies. So what you see is this new phenomenon of of Instagram influencers that are starting to blow up. There's like people with 20 million followers on Instagram down in Los Angeles that are now starting to connect with each other and are starting to do very strange things, like get into each other's photos so each other's audiences can start getting to know the other person. So you can kind of take maybe a couple 100,000 of your followers and give them to someone, and someone else can get a couple 100,000 of your followers by taking a photo with someone. It is some crazy network dynamics that are going on, and it's really important to unpack these things. Otherwise, we will forever be in our ignorance as other people are going and exploring these things. Meanwhile, we're not learning about them, but we have to be taught about these things. We have to have these important sort of processes disseminated to us so we better understand what's going on. So this was really interesting. They all got into a conversation about sliding into DMs. And I thought that was kind of funny. And what I think they mean by, sliding into DMs is that there's been a lot of push on Instagram for people that kind of like each other or want to hang out with each other sexually, that they'll just DM each other, direct message each other. And that's a very funny way, and I'll get to this with Summer, because, Summer was very not interested in receiving DMs from men because she pretty much knew that the men just wanted to have sex with her. Whereas, I guess Logan and, Big Mike here were saying like, yo, keep sending the DMs over, keep sending them over, because they're finding it interesting to parse through these DMs and to find women that they find attractive, to go out on dates with them, to have sex with them, that kind of stuff. And I think that's an interesting way for people to hook up and network with each other. But it can also be a little bit, as you'll see in the episode with Summer, it can be a huge attention suck. And when it's a big attention vortex, it takes you away from doing things like building your creative endeavoring into our world. So Shannon Chavez was talking about very interesting things about how when you use things like dating apps, that the amount of emotional intelligence that you gain from doing something like that is limited, as though you actually lose emotional intelligence in many ways with the tech era, because you're no longer learning how to have that eye contact with the other person. And you don't know when eyebrows are moving or cheekbones are moving or smiles or frowns, or, there's so many facial expressions to pursue and practice understanding. And we don't get that when we go just from the internet in terms of our messaging. So I thought that was really interesting about how this could potentially be a decrease in EQ, emotional intelligence. And we are losing these body cues. We're losing things like pheromones as well, our ability to smell what another person smells like and the smells that they give off with their cues, and match with them based on pheromones. So these sort of emotional intelligences, they spread to things like business, to family, to other intimacies that we have, friends, as in the more that we practice emotional intelligence, the better and better we get at actually carrying that through from an intimate relationship to our business and our family and whatnot. So extremely important to learn that. But, at the same time, there's a lot of neurodiversity that's going on. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of Gen Z kids that are not really so focused on emotional intelligence. And even millennials, they're more focused on maybe watching content on YouTube that really inspires them, and they don't want to focus so much of their time on their socializations. So I find that really interesting as well. So it's not about a push, but it's more like, let's have a conversation about what works for each person, because different things are going to work for different people. We've known that for a long time. All right. So except for things like world peace, because world peace is super important, that everybody agrees on that, and that there is no difference in that sense. It's ridiculous. There's so much nuance to everything, and that's been you can call me Alan Nuance Sakyan. Let's just roll with that from now on. Alan Nuance Sakyan. Alan Nuance Sakyan. Alan Nuance Sakyan. All right. So what else? Now, as we as we continue unpacking the things that were discussed on that episode, there's other things like when you see these like kind of like these photos that are being posted online. Swiping culture has made it so that we try and put ourselves in our absolute sexiest forward, our total sexiest, and these are the tannest, hottest, most beautiful, most relaxing, most in the most exotic locations photos ever. And that's what we put on our Instagram. You've seen some photos that I've posted on Instagram of myself going like this, right? I've done things like because I want us to feel more comfortable posting photos that aren't so attractive, because I think that is that's attractive. It's eccentric. It's different. It's being a maverick, which is very interesting for Logan to think about. Yeah, swiping culture has been very interesting. Now, it's important to not be facetious or flippant on these issues. Showing a serious or respectful attitude towards sexual health can be very important, especially for a lot of women that are currently experiencing issues with the way that that men are treating them sexually. And so, and for push for equality of opportunity and respect in general. So. Yeah, this was kind of interesting. There was a brief conversation about how there is like a fear of doing something in front of other people. Like with a partner, you can have a fear of going to the bathroom, right? You might not be able to pee or poo, or you might not be able to do certain things in front of a partner. And that's a very interesting sort of like, moment for you to realize, like, why is that? How is that affecting me? And talking to other people about that without there being shame about it, and just being open and totally okay with talking about it. I can't believe Logan said that he might want to adopt a kid. It's kind of crazy to think about there being like a mini Logan Paul, kind of like there's a mini Jake Paul right now, which we'll get into the network effect in the Jojo Siwa episode. That one, or this segment, that one's gonna be super long, so we gotta keep rolling. Morning sex is really important. We haven't talked about that enough yet. Morning sex, people, have more morning sex. Morning sex will get you going for the day. Some people's partners wake up at different hours. Like I used to have a partner where I'd wake up at like noon, and she would wake up at 8 a.m. And so we wouldn't be able to have sex in the morning, and at night she'd be tired and I'd stay up later. So that had something to do with our intimacy levels. And I think it's important to have more sex in the mornings, because that can be a great jumpstart for the rest of your day. And you can do things like have oral sex with each other instead of having to make out with each other, because there's morning breath, or go brush your teeth and get back into bed, as Shannon was saying. And yeah, just, really activating your full mind, body, soul, and spirit with someone else can be very profoundly interesting. That love that you can get to someone else. And you can actually take irrational behaviors when you're so in love. You can actually become quite irrational. But it's also very interesting because you can learn a lot from being super duper in love with someone like that. And so, okay, just to wrap up the first episode, that there was a like the fact that attention is so important in relationships between men and women. It's so difficult for them to balance. Like when two really powerful nodes come together, like really, really powerful ones, they need time to build what they're building into the world. So it's not just so easy as when two people aren't building that much. They can pass more time together and give each other more attention. But when they are trying to build something into the world, it takes them more time to build that into the world, and therefore they can spend less time with each other. So I find that to be very, very, very interesting to embody and spread to other people. And yeah, and just having great communication with partners is super important. Reading situations well, so we don't have any sexual misconducts that occur, so that we have optimal sexual consent occurring. You can go check out our episode with Aurora Quinn Elmore on enthusiastic consent culture. That was a really good episode where she talked about that in depth. All right, moving on to Jojo Siwa. Jojo Siwa is very, very cool. And the reason why I say she's very, very cool is because there's this sort of, there's this youthful spirit to her. She's 15 and a half years old, And at 15 and a half, she's doing insanely interesting things. She has her brand of bows, these bows that she's, you know, wearing in her head here, and that her friends are also wearing in this music video called Dream, which I'll talk about in a moment. She sold 40 million of those bows last year. And that was a big deal when I was hearing that on Impaulsive, because for someone to be able to sell 40 million bows across Target and all these other retail locations in 1 year is a huge deal for a 15-and-a-half-year-old. That probably puts her into the multimillionaire rankings. Plus, she's on Nickelodeon, and she does these videos, and she vlogs, and all this other kind of stuff. And she has a big following across her platforms. On Instagram, she's got 7.5 million followers, and she's just absolutely crushing. I'm going to go over those lyrics in a moment. And when she was on the show, they were unpacking kind of her like business acumen and kind of like what's going on with her. And she was saying some very thought-provoking things. Like one of the things that I thought was really important that she was teaching was that Gwen Stefani, who is a really interesting artist and singer, musician, that she said her advice to Jojo Siwa was to keep your clothes on. And I thought that was really profound advice, because I don't think enough, especially young girls, are getting that advice. Well, because some girls want to treat their body like in a beautiful aesthetic, and you're totally welcome to do so, because it's if you want to do that. But at the same time, when young girls are also taught about how they can, and young boys as well, how they can not do that, focus on aesthetic, but maybe focus on knowledge synthesis and dissemination, that they can maybe achieve a different sort of goal in their life. So anyway, I think that was a really interesting point that she said. But she's been working super hard. This girl, Jojo Siwa, like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. will be at Nickelodeon, then she'll come back, do a vlog, and hustle. Like, that's so crazy. She's 15 and a half, and she's doing that. And so it's crazy that she's had this help from her mom. Her mom was also helping her go through dance practice and singing practice, and, you know, and doing the choreography for all this stuff. And she was on a show with her and everything. And these sort of, like, you know, just insanely hard work ethics. When you work really hard, you're going to get a disproportionate amount of rewards, but you have to keep working that hard. So this is the idea of the competence hierarchy, is that this is not, in many ways, like Jojo Siwa. You can't just be like, oh, Jojo Siwa is part of the corrupt patriarchal hierarchy, because she's not. She's not at all. She's shattering through every single oppressive, violent, structural hindrance that's in place, and she's rocketing through it and building the future, and she's not letting other people tell her how to live her life and slow her down. She's just roaring and building and staying positive, and she's a very bubbly, extroverted personality in that sense. And so I think that's really interesting to acknowledge, is that we're having these Gen Zers that are just shattering through limiting beliefs and building into the world at crazy rates. And I think that's super, super interesting. Okay, let's talk about the song Dream. So in the song Dream, you know, she says, like, you know, that it, like, if you know, read this, we can do it if we see it. If you see it, you can be it. You believe it, you achieve it, you just DREAM. So the idea is that if you can inspire these young people around the world to, right here again, read it with me here. We can do it if we see it. If you see it, you can be it. You believe it, you achieve it, you just DREAM. It's so interesting that she wrote that, because, again, there's been this whole movement of see it, be it, see it, be it, see it, be it, that we're hearing around the world, and that it's especially applicable to people in low SES that need to see people of their status that have made it through their low SES brackets, or people of color in places like the United States, to see figures in those positions, etc. And so I think this is extremely, extremely important, and it's so cool that a 15-and-a-half-year-old is writing stuff like this. So you should go check out that video. And yeah, because, you know, all right, let's continue going on. And I was just about to say that the reason why I can't, play a video on our channel is like her video or whatever, is because we can get into trouble. And YouTube's already been delaying our monetization for the longest time. And I just want to say, YouTube, please hook us up with our ability to be able to monetize and grow our channel, because it's getting ridiculous that we've been waiting for almost a year to have this channel monetized so that we can continue growing our impact. It's ridiculous sometimes, but it's understandable because it's a massive conglomerate and it has tons of inquiries and everything. And so that's why I couldn't play video and show it to you. All right. Other stuff about JoJo that I think is very interesting. Her demographics, they ask each other about demos all the time. They're like, oh, what's your demo? Well, my demo is, she said her demo was 4 to 12-year-olds. And I thought that was crazy. So that means 4-year-olds are now starting to get, they're starting to get iPhones or iPads or whatever computers, and basically they're able to download the YouTube app and start watching YouTube. And I think that's kind of nuts, because it's like, well, okay, sure, they have access to the infinite amount of wisdom on the internet, but do they have access to, do they focus on getting these like cognitively driving or emotionally driving activities that they can be doing on the internet with the technology? Not necessarily true. They can get sucked into like conspicuous consumption or materialism vortexes on the internet. So that's also extremely important to know. But these demographics are crazy, because the lifetime value of having someone, like, for example, I think there was like a Chipotle post that she posted. Basically, if Chipotle can get her to market something to her following 2 to 14-year-olds, they can start doing Chipotle product placements into the souls of these young kids at a very young age, and that creates a longer lifetime value of the kid, which is absolutely crazy that kind of stuff is going on in the world. I'll be synthesizing more of this network effect stuff into some writings as well soon. So demographics are crazy, crazy, crazy. And I would like to just make a comparison, because I think that this is kind of apples and oranges, but because they're fruit, they can be compared, or because they're colors. Like if we say that maybe like, like let's say that Elon Musk is like green and Jojo Siwa is like purple or something. And so because Elon's green, Elon's having a different impact on the world than Jojo Siwa is. But Jojo's still having an impact on the world. My point being that, Elon's doing something in sustainability and long-term progress on Earth towards electrification, towards space colonization, and etc. And Jojo's doing something more on like the inspiration of the 2 to 14-year-olds, about getting them to dream something and see it and then become it and achieve that thing. And so there's just this very interesting difference between entertainers and scientists in some ways. And I think that that's an important distinction to make, is like, there's a bunch of kids in FIRST Robotics that I volunteer and judge and MC and do work with. And these kids in FIRST Robotics are not really the Jojo Siwas, but they're more so the engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, computer scientists, designers, programmers, CAD people. And they're young. These are like 6 to 18-year-olds that are doing this kind of stuff. So these are the future engineers and designers. So it's like, why aren't they getting a voice? How do we help them get a voice too? Why don't they have viral YouTube channels, right? So like, where is society conditioned to have had a missing link with something like that? And how do we potentially augment that and make it better over time? So there's more to talk about here. She's super against bullying, which is very, very interesting that she cares a lot about that. And I'm really happy that she does too. Actually, on the last episode we did on 6ix9ine, he's also very against bullying. She was homeschooled all her life, which is kind of nuts that when someone is homeschooled, that they're able to spend more time focusing on dancing, art, engineering, building, creating, because they don't have to go to a school, and they can actually get socialization at their school. They can get socialization at their dance practice or at their art practice, etc. So socialization occurs in places that are not necessarily school, which is very interesting. So you can get socialization and homeschooling packaged together, and that can be extremely powerful because you can really focus in on your art at a young age, like we saw with Jojo Siwa, which she was actually able to achieve with that. Okay, more so is that she's doing the nuts stadium tours. I can't believe it. She's like sold out her tickets in a day, I think, for 3,000 to 5,000 seat theaters. And she's doing it in stadiums around the world. And that's what we want to do. We want to fill stadiums with curious intellectuals for full day multidisciplinary events. And so it's interesting that she's doing that as well. And that, she rocks it. She got there she's got there at 15 and a half. It's crazy. Congrats to her. And that, let's get there for the curious intellectuals as well. It's kind of nuts that she's supporting these kids called Tatum and Oakley. Let me show you who they are. Tatum and Oakley. So these kids are this account has 2.2 million followers, and it's these two young identical twins, and it's managed by their parents, Tatum and Oakley. And what's nuts about this is that it's like, at what age do we say that it's totally okay to make Instagram and YouTube accounts for our children that are not yet birthed into the world? So like, our children are still gestating inside our womb, and we're going, let's make them an Instagram and a YouTube account with their name. Let's make sure that we can get them that name. Okay, it's getting a little bit ridiculous and excessive, but it's also understandable because it's like network effect stuff. But like, what if the kid doesn't want to be photographed their entire life? Like, they're too young to understand that, but I guess it's also beautiful aesthetically. It's kind of crazy that this stuff is going on, and it's such a nuanced conversation to have. It's absolutely nuts, and I'm glad that you're able to see this firsthand. What's going on with even identical twins that are, I think, 2 years old now. Crazy. Shout out. Who will teach robots ethics? Bum, 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 bum. Check this out, simulationseries.com. You can find our merch on the site. Thought-provoking, of course. All right, back at it. So it's kind of crazy that this stuff is happening, and it's happening a lot in Los Angeles, and we have to just keep an eye on how this is going on. So they're talking about how this is crazy, that 50% of kids want to grow up and be YouTube stars or influencers. Holy fuck. That is nuts. If that's a true statistic, that young kids growing up into the world want to be YouTube stars or influencers in some way, that is both extremely interesting because they're very inspired to want to do that, and maybe they're going to build incredible things from that. I totally see that as part of this, but I also see potentially a lot of mental health or anxiety issues or depressive issues or materialism issues or follower count issues or brand issues and all this other kind of stuff coming up as well. And I know we'll make it through it, but I'm just having the foresight to talk about these things because I do foresee them as an insanely important things that are going to be coming up in the social media and attention economy that we're currently facing. So it's crazy that people are naming their fandom nowadays. So, this is videos out now teaching Logan Paul to dance. I haven't seen that yet. That's interesting that they did that. They're naming their fandom, which is crazy. Logan's called the Low Gang. She calls hers the C1-ators. And so it's crazy that people are naming their fandoms. This stuff's nuts. Most of JoJo's friends are 25 to 35 years old because she's very intellectually advanced for her age. Wow, JoJo said that she skydives 3 times a week. I think Logan also skydives quite often, and that's very interesting. Isn't that interesting that these influencers that are super bubbly and extroverted and outgoing do things like go and face their greatest fears of jumping out of planes by themselves and pulling parachutes and floating down the ground? I've skydived before, and it's absolutely incredible. But it's interesting how they do that to challenge themselves, and I think that that's only the nascent stages. That's only the beginning of where we see people challenging their fears and building what they want into the world and not being scared and just doing it. So there's kind of another another thought about this on the way out is like, I wonder how many people notice what JoJo went through, because there are some videos of her online where she went through a tremendous amount of work to get to where she's at. So I just want to make that clear that she went through a tremendous amount of work to get to where she's at, because a lot of people think that, oh, it's just magical, that all these things happen so easily, but they don't. It's like a lot of hard work to get to these places. And I want to know if people have mapped the powerful nodes in Los Angeles, because I know the billionaires in the world just got mapped. I want to know if these powerful influencer nodes are getting mapped and what that looks like, because they all kind of are a little bit like very entertaining, outgoing, and risk-taking and stuff like that. And there's not very many introverted ones. Like Christine Sidelko is kind of interesting because she's slightly heavier set. And so because of that, she's actually able to get people of alternative body types in and see that see it, you can be it type thing, which is very interesting and very important. And so having more kids of other skin colors, having more kids of other sexual interests or body types and all this different kind of stuff, neurodiversities, again, like introverted ones would be so interesting if we could get introverted kids that are super intelligent to be behind the camera and talking about what they're building and what they're thinking, because a lot of them are crunching a lot more information, nuance that's not necessarily related to entertainment or acting and stuff like that. All right, moving on to Summer Rae, the last episode. So Summer Rae is, let me show you here. Summer Rae is, here's her on the, oops, my bad. Here's her on the show. So here's Summer Rae on the show, and here's her, here's her Instagram page, and she's very much so like a model on Instagram, and she's also like an influencer on Instagram and whatnot. But she's also starting to branch out into like clothing and merch and other kind of stuff like that. And so I think a lot of what's going on with this, and we'll unpack this, but I think a lot of what's going on is a lot of these nodes are starting to mingle, like the connections made, whether it's through a DM or whether it's through a connection of some other sort. And these two nodes of, let's say, 10 million followers meet up. They take a picture together. It'd be interesting to map how many of the followers from that node that has 10 million, that's maybe a man, go and start following the woman that has 10 million, and then how many from the woman that has 10 million go and start following the man. And actually analyzing these statistics and observing what's going on when these nodes meet, and if they take Instagram stories or Instagram pictures, feed pictures, and post those, and then what they're actually talking about. So like how many followers are exchanged, and then also what are they talking about? Are they trying to promote each other's merch, promote each other's ideas? Like what's going on in that sense, and how can this be used for the absolute positively best good, for getting society to be the most beautiful pinnacle of a civilization it can possibly be? So that's a really interesting field to keep an eye on. And I think that, that's part of what Impaulsive is all about. Impaulsive is a lot about bringing on really powerful people and talking to them about what they're working on in this like network effect and influencer space. So, Summer mentioned how she's like worked really hard on her body. And I think that's really important to remember, is that like, this is not just something that is, just like with JoJo, it's not something that's just given to you, right? And the same thing's true about Shannon, the first guest, and about Logan, and about myself, and that these things are not given to you either, that you've worked hard to become who you are today, and that you got to keep working hard in order to continue achieving your goals. And so she had this quote about like, okay, well, if I've worked so damn hard to achieve my goals of having beautiful aesthetic on my body, I'm not just going to keep the Ferrari in the garage. I'm going to go and take it out and show the world. And that's great that you have that mentality, because awesome, go and showcase what you've worked really hard to achieve to the world. Go do it. But at the same time, it works for certain people, and other people need to hear kind of what JoJo potentially heard from Gwen Stefani, which was, keep your clothes on. So I think that's an important distinction to make, because some people want to work on their body like Greek and Roman statues of beautiful men, women, etc. And I think that's an important nuanced distinguishment to make between those two things. It can also get a little bit crazy, because there are things going on, like Summer has to be careful about her boyfriend that she's keeping on the low key, because there will be men. So she has like an 80-20, she said, demographic. Again, demos are important. Imagine the demographics of these two nodes that are colliding. Look, we were talking about 10 million each. What are the demographics? Is one of them 18-year-old men and the other one is 35-year-old women, or 12-year-old women and 22-year-old men, etc.? So how are these nodes actually mingling and merging? And she said that because of her boyfriend that she has, some of the guys were, acting up about that, that were following her. And I thought that was, again, that was very interesting, that dynamic exists, and that it's just that same thing applies to maybe women that follow Logan and whatnot. So that when he gets a girlfriend, that maybe he gets less DMs and whatnot. And Logan asked her about DMs, like how, and I mentioned this earlier, that she no longer responds to the DMs because she feels like a lot of the DMs are just coming from men that want to have sex with her, which I thought was, that's a very, just real and honest sort of perspective and mentality to have, is that I'm not gonna do that, and that's not, if that's not of interest to her, that's not of interest to her, and good on her for acknowledging that about herself. So she's got 20 million followers. It's crazy. She's got that many followers. So another point along with the Ferrari point was that there's also craziness going on in the world. Like everyone should know about epicanthoplasty. It's something that's being gifted to Asian graduates. And what epicanthoplasty is it's this insane removing of the, I think it's called the epicanthal fold, but I'll show it to you right here. It's absolutely nuts. Check this out. So, yep, right here. Epicanthoplasty, known medically as medial or lateral epicanthoplasty, is a type of eye surgery that aims to lengthen the inner parts of the eye to make the eye bigger. Inner corner fold removal. So here it is, right? Here's the inner corner fold right there removed, and you get this more open eye. And that's that's something for the West, right? It's a very Western-esque thing, is to do that so that you can look more Western from the East. And that kind of stuff is absolutely nuts that's going on. So what are we actually pushing onto young people with cosmetic surgeries? Because Summer said she hasn't gotten any cosmetic surgery, but what does it mean when you've actually gotten so much cosmetic surgery for the Botoxes, which is, it's crazy that people are getting, Botox for their foreheads and stuff like that. It's just crazy. The butts, the boobs, the abs, the bypass, gastro bypass surgeries, that people are doing these things to look a certain way aesthetically. And that's kind of like, it's kind of nuts that we're doing that. And it's nuts that there are more obese people or overweight people now in the world than there are starving people. Things like this are just crazy, and we need to talk about them more. Not using makeup, not going to bed with makeup will keep you younger. I don't know the nuance of that so much, but it seems to make sense. But it's also crazy to use a makeup remover pad on your face every single night, 365 times. It's like, maybe you just don't wear so much makeup. Maybe, don't hate me for saying that. I know makeup makes sometimes men and women think that they look beautiful and whatnot, but consider not wearing makeup. Consider not being completely raw. Think about hunter-gatherer stuff. Be raw. See what that see how that makes you feel, and how interesting that is. So yeah, again, demographics in Los Angeles, again, for these influencers. Summer says that, this is kind of funny. She says that, that some famous guys are cheaters and bad people. And that may be true. And I think that may be same thing for the famous women that are out there, and that they're also extremely busy people. So I think a lot of women and men are trying to get each other's attention, and there's a big disconnect, because when you try and get each other's attention, you're also trying to, as powerful nodes, build into the world. I mentioned that earlier. And so that's a big issue with relationships, I think. This branding of the episode, he actually gave her a D written on a card, but D means dick, and he says, I gave Summer Rae the D. It's just so interestingly clickbaity, and what is that doing to society, the whole clickbaity stuff? all this nuance to unpack. There's still so much more to talk about. Demographics are very, very interesting. Alexis Wren, I want to just show you like Alexis Wren really quick. She has a very interesting account because she has a lot of followers, but she talks about her like insecure. She talks about like her insecurities and what are other people's insecurities. And so she's actually, I want to know where that photo was again. I'll see if I can find it. It might be, I don't know, might be this one. Let me see if I can find it quick. Yeah. One of my insecurities is my 5 head. What are one of your insecurities? So this kind of stuff's really interesting because, if you're asking your audience about insecurities, what you may actually be doing is you may be doing a couple things. One thing is you may be, they may be saying, oh, don't worry about that. You're so beautiful. Okay, there's that. But then there's also people are like, oh, well, she sees that she's not perfect and that's actually really great. Or maybe you are absolutely perfect in the way that you are in the world. And that's also another nuanced point. But there is a good amount of people that see that and then think, okay, cool. Now I can admit that, people know this about me, but look at how hairy I am. I'm a very, very hairy person. Like you can totally tell that we evolved from chimps because when you look at my chest and, I've gotten used to that now because I think it's ridiculous when people say things like, oh, you're so hairy. And like, I would get upset or something. So again, it's about embodying the things that make us who we are. And so I just thought that was a very interesting point that I wanted to share about what it's like to explore things like that about our accounts and how we talk to our followings and whatnot. I'm just bringing this back up again because it's crazy that this is happening with children around the world, that these accounts are being made with kids like Tatum and Oakley. It's just absolutely crazy. And then I want to bring up a couple questions on the way out. These tribal dynamics are really strange. What I mean by like tribal dynamics is like when you look at like the Low gang here, or Summer Rae's gang, or Jojo Siwa's gang, etc. That these gang dynamics, these followership dynamics, like we saw with the Logan Paul KSI fight, is just kind of crazy that these dynamics exist, and that it's kind of like what's going on with naming these groups and how they participate with each other, and and how these nodes can merge and who goes to which node and stuff like that. So I want to know what percentage of millennial/Gen Z parents in the U.S. are divorced and how many are cordial with each other, because I think the percentage is over 50% of millennial Gen Z parents are divorced, and I wonder what percentage are cordial. Maybe half of them, 25% of those, are actually still cordial with each other. That was ridiculous. There was this part about the Clout House Clout Gang, because Summer Rae moved out of the Clout House, and I just want to make this point really quickly about the Clout House Clout Gang, because they have this, like, they're building a really strong influencer network, the multiple houses, tons of influencers living there. Something crazy is, like, if you go look at FaZe Banks, I don't really get how he is selling an assault rifle necklace. So he's actually like selling an assault rifle necklace, and as he's complaining about the recent shootings that were happening in Los Angeles. So again, you have to see how your first principles align, and maybe people that are like science communicators, polymaths in some senses, emotional intelligence experts in senses, can come and help with these things to open-minded individuals, and they can get them being like, well, maybe I should change this line to maybe a peace sign instead of an assault rifle or something like that. Yeah, they have an esports league and a bunch of other stuff, and so she moved out of the Clout House, Summer did, and moved into her own house because she was seeing things. This is another crazy thing. Like when you're living in a communal space, people like communal spaces because communal spaces bring you a lot of the commune. They bring you community, and that's really interesting. But at the same time, when you wake up in the morning and there's girls that are wearing heels in the kitchen that you don't even know because they were staying with some of the guys that night, that's crazy that, you're now sharing something supposed to be a private, intimate kitchen space with people you don't even know like that. It can be both a positive and a negative. It's kind of crazy. I want to know who the Logan Paul of China is, if there one exists, or who the Logan Paul of the Middle East is. And what I mean by that is, who's the most eccentric, mavericky person in those areas of the world, in Russia, in Europe, in Brazil, in South America, Latin America, etc., Africa? Who are these super eccentric people, and what are they building? How are they impacting their cultures in those areas? And I want to know what's going on with the Gen Z kids in those different countries across the world, how those Gen Z kids are using Instagram, and how they're what their deal is with network effects, materialism, entertainment, etc., YouTube and Twitter. I'm curious as to how those effects are. All right, that's it for this recap on Impaulsive's episodes 1 through 3. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Greatly appreciate it. Much love to you all. Couple things on the way out is just really start having more thought-provoking conversation with other people in your life about network theories and network effects and what's going on in Los Angeles. Stay ahead of the curve. You heard it here first. Stay ahead of the curve. And also, give us your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Again, I'm the host of Simulation, Alan Sakyan. And much love, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we will see you soon. Much love. Peace.